Hello, everyone. This is FLAMEAPE, Gregory Giordano, artist, illustrator, and now I do some interviews. And today's interview is part 2 of my interview with Pippa Bailey, horror author, marketing social media promoter, and one half of the review YouTube podcast, the Ghoul Guides. Pippa Bailey is a resident of the UK, specifically Shropshire, England, principally a horror writer, independent reviewer, and YouTube personality. And her supernatural and sci-fi stories have been featured in several anthologies and zines. Her debut novel, Lux, is due for release in summer of 2018. And of course, you can see many, many things that she promotes and writes and so on anywhere as Pippa Bailey. And of course, she has her website, pippabailey.co.uk, and you can find her on Amazon in the links below. Pippa, it is now for the second time and over many, many times a privilege and a lot of fun to talk to you today.
Yay!
How's that?
Let's start it with yay. Yay!
So
I'm dressed like an adult today, right, with my wine and my onesie.
Is that a Chewy onesie?
It's my Chewbacca onesie. It's super comfy. This is what I've chosen to wear.
Like, oh, sorry.
Oh no, so this is just what I've chosen to wear, my Chewbacca onesie today. It's
the design over the shoulder. I was like, that's the ammo belt from Chewbacca.
Yep. Yeah. It's Star Wars. I love this thing. It's great. It's really furry. It's like if I didn't shave my legs, nobody would ever know.
Right. So last week, and by the way, if anybody is watching live, we have one person watching now. If you are watching the show live, and excuse the glare from my glasses, but actually, you know what? I may not need these right now. Well, yeah, if I need them, I'll put them back on. Because there's a lot of lights from everywhere. I don't want to make too much glare. But if you are coming to this first, and either because it's already recorded or you're watching it live now and you didn't see the other half, just go to my channel, and which you're watching right now, and it's the next latest video that's been made, and it's the same title, only it says part 1. So anyway, with that having been said, when we last talked, which I think might have been last Saturday, is that right?
Yeah, it was Saturday.
It was only 4 or 5 days ago. We covered a lot of stuff. We definitely went back and forth. You asked me some questions about what I'm doing, but I want to make sure that we focus on you more this time.
Okay.
But I'm trying to think of what things we didn't really cover, and there's a few. One is definitely have you read some of your book, or whatever, or was it your book or one of the short stories that you wanted to read a segment of?
One of the short stories, but I guess I could read you some of the novel. It's not amazingly edited, but
well, I think
nobody's ever really heard anything in the novel.
I mean, there's room to read both too.
If you want to, I guess, but nobody's ever heard any of the novel before, to be honest.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, think that over in terms of what might work for you better.
Okay.
But we did talk about that, and I've since gotten, which is great, by the way, some questions from people who either know my Facebook page or maybe knew yours and saw, followed the breadcrumb trail and put some questions in, I think, the last post.
Oh, cool.
I think. And then also on the Facebook chat, I got one question from... right. So I'm going to be juggling a lot, so if I seem a little awkward, it's because I'm going to be going between a few tabs. But I would also encourage anybody who's actually watching right now. Anders the Viking says, "Hey, Chewy, hey, beard guy."
That is my photographer.
Be very, very careful about who you call which.
Yes, so I could grow a lovely beard. I'd grow a wizard beard though, and I just sit there stroking it all day.
Well, also, we we don't want to pin down exactly what kind of beard we're talking about, right? Like
that would just be awkward to comb out.
Is it the social construct of beard, or is it the physical? Just.
Oh no! I'd grow a proper sort of Dumbledore wizard beard. You weave it into different things. It'd be great. Make a great wizard.
So thank you, Anders and Viking. I'm glad to see you here. But I was going to say, anybody who's now started to watch, if it's possible, please go into the chat area to the right of our heads and put your questions in there, because it's likely I'm not going to go back and forth to Facebook or other places and find them. Also, I think for Pippa, maybe she might be more versatile, but for me, if you can dump them in there, that'd be awesome. So I think it'd be good if we just get right into some reading. And could you just tell us briefly about which story you're going to read from?
Oh, sure. I clicked a button and it did stuff.
You have to get there.
No. I clicked a button for opening Q&A because I was like, oh yeah, that might be the question thing. No, it wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah. I was going to read a bit from the latest story that came out by me, which came out at Christmas, and it's from an anthology called 12 Days, which is through Berdizo Books, and they're Berdizo Books.
Can you? How do I spell that?
Burdizzo. But they need to put Berdizo Books, otherwise you will end up with clamps for castrating a horse.
I just got that.
You gotta be careful how you look it up. Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, I mean, I don't mean that in the way that like people always say that's awesome no matter what the hell they're talking about. I just mean in this case in particular, I actually think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So this is a charity anthology, and all the money from this.
Which anthology is it? Because I'm
12 days.
12 days.
12 days, and this is the second one. So this is they did an edition in 2016. This is the 2017 issue. And all the money from this went to, or will go to, a Cystic Fibrosis Trust.
So because right now I'm sharing with the audience. The publisher. I'm sharing with them they don't actually, it doesn't look like they have an actual page on.
If you just look me up, you can probably find it linked to my stuff.
Oh, your page, I know you're like, I was just trying to see if maybe that publisher had a Amazon page. And I'm trying to find, it's interesting. Are these their other books?
They're the other books by the publisher, but we have lots of anthologies that have been out through us.
So I wonder, is there another, what's the name of it again? I'm sorry.
But this one's called 12 Days. But it may just bring up the original one. Yeah, 2017. Oh, that's not one that I want to see. That doesn't do anything. Actually, unfortunately, one of those books has two authors in it. One with the first name Pippa and one with the last name Bailey, and I keep being associated with it.
Nice.
That's the original one. That's not this one.
That's not this one. Okay.
No. Okay. But it's the same company.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, I just wanted to, if there was a quick, do they have a website or are they on?
Yeah, you can find us on Facebook.
Right here?
Yep.
Whoa.
Hey!
Oh, that's
the mobile. For that book as well.
Oh, that's the mobile page.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I've got a story in that book as well. And that book is...
Sparks.
Yeah, Sparks. I don't know where that is. I think, is that on my shelf or is that next to me? No, I think that one's on my shelf. Let me have a look. No, that one's here. Oh. That one's here as well.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, there we go. There we go. That's it. 12 days.
Oh, here we go. So they are on
Amazon.
Amazon.
The book.
I just wanted to flash that so that people can say, like,
you flashed them with a good book.
Well, yeah, and actually, maybe buy it, right?
Yep, go buy it. All the money goes to a Cystic Fibrosis Trust charity. I don't get a penny from it, and I don't have any problem with that whatsoever because it's a fantastic charity to put money towards.
Well, that's great. That's awesome. And frankly, those can be, we were talking before also about things like self-promotion and self-publishing or sort of the sort of tier above self-publishing where it's sort of like collective author groups and small publishers and stuff, all that kind of big encompassing thing. And you know, it's worthy to give away your talents sometimes for something like that, because it does get recognized because of, let's say, the
Yes.
charity that it's helping out, the people that they're helping out, and that can be as valuable as any other promotion you spend money on. So
definitely. I just love working with this publishing company. I mean, every book that I write through them will be for charity, and I don't get anything from it, but I love working with the people, and I love the group, and I will quite happily continue writing for them because it's just a group of people I really enjoy writing with.
And
I'll be writing another story for them this year.
Oh, that's great.
It's not been announced yet. But yes, so I can read a bit. I've not actually read any of this story to anyone because it only came out again sort of at the end of the year.
So what is the story?
Well, this is the 12 days of Christmas, and we were each given a day, and we had to write a story based around. So you know, so you had like 12 drummers. 12 drummers drumming. I can't even remember it now. So it's terrible.
Yeah, that's right. Yep, that's right.
Yeah, 12 drummers. Yeah, 12 drummers drumming, 11 pipers piping, lords leaping, and I was given 9 ladies dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Which there were so many different ways I could have gone with it. For a while, I was sort of playing with the idea of pole dancing or burlesque dancing or something that's kind of more my sort of guise of stuff. But I kept getting this image of a painting that was on the wall at my school when I was a child, and it was this ballerina with lots of other sort of ballerinas around her, and it was a really weird, dark picture, and I loved it. And just so the story ended up coming from that, and I started writing the story, and then realized the story was going to be incredibly long, and that's going to become a novella. And so I wrote a prequel to that story. That story is called The Soul Press now, and that's it. That's going to become a novella. So I wrote 9 Ladies Dancing as a prequel to that story, so it tells the creation of this painting. And I guess I'll start at the beginning and stop me when you want to stop me.
Yeah, go right ahead.
So 9 Ladies Dancing by Pippa Bailey. Crude chains scored the dusty ground, firing sparks across stone. An empty trunk covered in years of decay creaked open. Mildew fouled the air. Cobwebs furnished the red velvet interior, like intricate lace. Insects escaped the candlelight, skittering through unseen holes. The trunk had lain barren for decades, a decadent reminder of finer times. 2 men dragged a large, covered square, bound with rags and rope, towards the chest. Detritus that coated the crypt floor. Covers tore loose, revealing a delicately painted foot, smothered by flames. They lowered the hidden painting, its form skewed on the soft interior, and slammed the lid. Eruptions of dust danced in the light. Wincing under the bulky chains, they draped endless links around the chest and hammered the final circlet in place. No one knew of this location save themselves. Attempts to destroy the painting had failed. Fire licked at the canvas, caressing the figures, but would do no harm. Water neither. An ocean couldn't scour that paint and dilute the power of those women. They turned from the sealed chest. A multitude of bricks and mortar lay at their feet. Through solemn tears, they sealed themselves inside. With any memory of this cursed painting, a slow-burning candle was their only comfort. It's unknown precisely when the initial symbol appeared, but the first incident took place in the autumn of 1832. A small half circle, a cross within its boundaries, smouldered on the curled bark of a birch tree, hunched along the church wall. Embers bore deep within the pristine lines as if carved by a flaming knife. A hazy Sunday afternoon, and noisy families poured from the church doors onto cobbled streets. Children ran alongside their parents, kicking piles of rotten amber leaves. Reverend Bennett waved away his parishioners and toured the grounds. To any passerby, he was a joyful spectator, admiring families at play. A quaint pebble path scoured the outline of the church. He enjoyed his Sunday walks, soaking in the last rays of autumn sun before winter descended. The twisted birch tree blotted sunlight. Great roots clawed at the earth, obscuring his path. The groundskeeper would need to tame this beast of a tree. He admired its mottled silver bark, running his hand against the roughness. The symbol called to him. His mouth twitched, then hung slack. Transfixed, he drifted towards the tree. Feet scored lines through soft earth. Eyes glazed, they drained of colour until only orbs of white shuddering in damp sockets. The symbol faded. He launched back to the church entrance, his awkward gait covered ground quickly, scouring loose stones and mouldering detritus that tumbled alongside him. He shuffled to the raised pulpit and pressed his body against the cool surface. Crunch. He slammed his fists into the ancient wood. It splintered. Plumes of dust filled the air, and jagged chunks crashed at his feet. Oak slivers pierced his skin, blood pooling in torn flesh. Inside the breached space was a shining white square. A canvas, untouched by decay, unnatural, beauty amid dirt that clung to the jagged hole. He grabbed the canvas, tucked it under his arm, and then stole away to his retirement room, sealing himself inside. He scrambled around on all fours. Books cascaded from shelves. Bottles struck each other. Glass tinkling across stone, and the floor would Bottles struck each other. Glass tinkling across stone. The floor showered in rich floral crimson. He clawed a dense mass of charcoal from the pungent fireplace ashes. It became his tool of choice. Cross-legged, he scratched at the canvas. Black lines and marks formed undulating bodies. 9 women, 9 wavering figures. He worked to exhaustion, fingertips cracked, blood wept from open sores, droplets littering the canvas base. He worked until the charcoal ran out, until his fingers wore out, scraping at the canvas with naught but bloody bone stumps. That's the start of that one.
That's really great.
Yeah, so that's the beginning of that story.
And that is that the form that is in the book, in the anthology?
Yep, I'm reading from the anthology.
Okay. And how is it going? It's really effective, number one. Number two, like while you were reading it, because I wanted to just hear the words, I was actually trying very hard to find some imagery that might have gone with it so we could have like flashed it on the screen to accompany you. If I had thought about this ahead of time, I would have had it done in time. But the thing was that what I found was while I was looking at images, and I'm just going to share Google Images. There won't be anything that's going to freak anybody out. But I was seeing things like, like this, right? And I was looking for folk horror images, and that's where I feel like I'm hearing what I'm hearing in this stuff that you're doing. This is real. This is like what now is being referred to, at least in my opinion, as folk horror, right? I mean, you're definitely
this one's a weird one for me. I mean, I write
like
as a general rule. I write
like
supernatural horror. Oh, I love that picture.
Yeah,
I have that picture saved somewhere.
Yeah,
it's so lovely.
But I feel a lot out of the writing that you're doing immediately, and
oh yeah, very much so.
And I'm wondering if there's and that's why I was wondering if you were a fan of what is now called folk horror and the kind of stuff that sort of lies around it.
I love linking back into the older supernatural fears of things, the older folk tales. I think I'm going to end up involved potentially with a folk anthology this year.
Oh, great! Dealing
with folk tales and stuff. And I suppose almost all of my stories are rooted in some preternatural fear that people have. I mean, I suppose all horrors, but I write supernatural because I deal with everyday horror and I don't want to write about that. This is very much the power that women have over men. The idea, and I suppose it links into another story that I've got about looking for somebody in particular. So these women who are in the painting, which so the story tells of the painting being gradually created, and the creation of the painting releases these 9 women upon this town, and the effect that has on the men of this town. And I mean, I can give you a very kind of mild at the start. It starts quite relatively tame for what I write. I mean, I never thought I'd write gore. But it's got a little bit. So I give you.
Is this another writing of yours in the same book?
No, this is part of the same story. This is
part of the same story.
A little bit much further on, because it's quite a long story. I think it's like 6,000 or 7,000 words. I just give you this other bit that just kind of gives you more of an idea of what the rest of the story is like.
Mm-hmm.
Thud. Wooden splinters shot through the musky air and tangled in his beard. A long-handled axe wavered above his head. Sunlight gleamed onto its sharpened surface. Thud. He let the axe drop again. A thick log split clean in half, chunks rocked on the dusty ground. He chucked the pieces into a dishevelled pile at the side of his crooked house. Fragrant sheets adorned the washing line, billowing like ancient sails. Leaves caught in autumn gusts buffeted the clean surface, leaving warped imprints from dirt and pollen. Pine needles caught in tangles of blonde hair and tumbled down her robed body. The woman twirled and danced towards him, arms outstretched as if to draw him into her waving, rhythmical dance. Air heavy with sickly sweet stench. He retched and searched for the source. Slipping between the sheets, axe dragging at his side, gouging chunks from supple earth. Her approach, a sickness on the land, nature's silence. Birdsong muted, foul wind howled its last and cowered. Visage of a fallen angel, body as pale as the moon, she too slipped between the sheets. Soft breasts swayed beneath transparent cloth that enveloped her delicate frame. Gormless, he reached for her. Silent laughter fell from crimson lips. She danced closer and circled him, stroking fingers down his wiry chest. He gave in. Attempting to hold her, she buckled and slammed a fiery hand against him, forcing undulating fingers under his taut skin. They moved like snakes, rippling under layers of muscle. His eyes rolled back, white shining from his tanned face. A hushed moan acknowledged her exploration of his body. The axe shook in his hand, metal slamming against leather boots. She pulled back empty-handed. He twitched and staggered forwards. She ignored his advances and floated backwards through the fluttering linen. Not the one, she mouthed. His chin slammed onto his chest, hand gripping the axe with renewed force. Crunch. He swung it upwards into his own shoulder. Sharp metal sliced through flesh like butter. Blood spurted from the wound. Cascades of acrid iron showered the hanging sheets. He yanked it free and swung again. Glinting silver cleaved flesh from bone. Blood showered his face in pulsating bursts. His arm tore loose, skin split, tendrils of muscle flopping against his tattered shirt. It tumbled to the ground, fingers twitching. Blood loss slowed his progression, but he was still under her spell. Teeth grit, the blade struck his leg, splitting a hole in his trousers. Dry soil became pools of crimson mud. Bone splintered, and he collapsed to the ground, hacking at mutilated limbs. His wife screamed when she found him. Her husband, a mess of mutilated flesh, axe still swinging from his remaining arm. So it gets kind of gruesome with what these women force people to do to themselves. But yeah, that story's so a prequel to a novella that hopefully I would love to get out this year if I get it written. But the novel's a priority at the moment.
Okay, so that's not Lux. Like Lux is not the continuation of that story.
Lux is not the continuation of this. I have on the go at the moment. I have about 4 or 5 short stories.
Right.
And I have two novellas and Lux, which is the novel series, which I will get the first book out in June. I have made a pinky promise with somebody that I will get this novel out in June, and it will be out. So
I have to say that when I'm hearing the words of that other segment, I'm coming right back to primal folk horror.
Yeah.
Fairy tales, legendary stuff. A classic grandmother stories, right? All that kind of stuff is all there. And then this other layer, which there's a number of layers in there, but one of the other layers that's right there is a modern thing, which is like the much more graphic depiction of the violence, right? The slicing in, and not with language that is, and it would be fine for a different kind of writing, but not in a writing that, or not in a word choice that is melodramatic. Actually, it's like you had said.
Down.
you know, somebody took a ham off the shelf and sliced the ham and put it on the table. Like it's not, and because of that, I think it makes it more creepy, weird, and also kind of inevitable.
Yeah.
And also kind of, there's a kind of an inevitability about it that then takes power away from the reader and makes you feel, you know, really vulnerable and there's a lot of horror in that vulnerability, right?
Yeah, because I don't like to write. I don't like to write grotesque things just to get people to go, ugh. I like to write things that people can relate to being horrible and they potentially could, I suppose, experience on a weird but supernatural level. I mean, this story's, the way it's written is almost as if it's being told by somebody. So it starts with, you know, the first you know, we don't know when the first symbol appeared, but it happened from this, and it tells that this story. I mean, the main character of the actual book, or sorry, the main character of this novel story thing doesn't appear until like 2/3 of the way through this story. He doesn't appear, and then it follows him and his experience with what happens with these ladies. And it was a bit weird writing this. I was kind of worried about how it would be taken, because it starts with 3 characters creating the painting, and then what happens with the ladies from the painting, and then it follows the main character and his experience and what happens to him.
Right.
And what happens to the painting, you know, because this is written as if it's in 1832. So this is written and it's all designed as if it's in that time period. And the novella that will come from that takes place now.
So so not only is it backstory, but it's backstory in a historical sense. But the novel itself is the story that comes from it, that will come later, is contemporary.
It's contemporary. It's set with a painting restorer who is trying to restore this painting after it's been damaged. That's been found in the grounds of this church, and he's restoring this painting. And it's what happens when he starts to fix the ladies of this painting who have been damaged.
Right. Because, and of course, the classic thing, which is like, don't mess with things, because now
don't mess with things. It's the painting is in the novella. The painting is found in the basement of the church when then the church is being converted into a gallery, and this church is actually in 3 or 4 of my stories in different forms. It's based on a church that's in my village, actually, my village I grew up in. I mean, it's the same town. The town that this takes place in is the same town that's in the novel Lux. It's the same town that's in my story that's in For a Shock. It all happens in the same town, different periods of time. I mean, in in the novella, I mean, in a novella, the main character drives past a character that's in another story that's talking, and then that story continues. And I wanted it all to link, and I love how I've managed to sort of get everything to link together. But it's hard work, sort of. You know, it's like in For a Shock. There's my main character's watching the news, and it's a news reporter, and in the 12 ladies dancing, it's sort of the same street. You know, this woman's like sort of driving down 100 years later, and in the novella, the man actually drives past this news reporter on the street that's being watched on the news by a different character in another story. And it's a weird web of mess, but it works for me.
So you're actually thinking about how do I want to say this? It's like you don't. It's not as simple as just now we're here, we were there. You're actually going to start. There's a lot of back and forth.
Yes, I'm a planner, so I like to try and make everything work and everything line up. And yeah, I just love, because I love the characters in my Lux book so much, and I love the town that I created. I want to use more of it. I want to explore more of it. Because this church is in a story that isn't out yet before it becomes a gallery. And I'm desperate to get that book out, that story out. I want to share that story with so many people, because I love that one that I've written, and it just hasn't been picked up by a book yet. And I'm just it's driving me crazy because I want to share it with people.
When so now have you got a timeline?
Of a timeline for whether that one will be released, or a timeline is the order in which the stories run.
A timeline about release.
I've sent it off to a anthology. I'm hoping it'll be considered. I probably won't hear for a while yet. If it is, I think that's out towards the end of this year. I think the cutoff date for that anthology is August, because there might be some quite fancy names in it. So I'm not sure at the moment.
So here's a kind of a side question thing. If you're, because I imagine there's probably some people who are watching who are who want to get into writing, or they're writing, but they want to kind of do what you're doing. They want to get published in anthologies. They're trying to get that start, right? And I don't want to belabor our conversation with too much of the like, how do you get started writing? Like we're not going to do that. But but what do you do? You've written this thing. Maybe you've written it because you wanted to get into this particular anthology. I'm sure there are a lot of people who they'll see the opportunity and they'll say, okay, and then they're going to write something, right? Some people might purpose an existing short story that makes sense with the theme of whatever it is that's the anthology, right? I'm sure everybody does everything in between. But let's say, like, okay, I've done this. I've got the story, whichever the origin is. I send it out. They reject it. It may be for any number of reasons, but it's been rejected. What do you do with that story? Like, in other words, what do you, like, and I'm not saying you've been rejected per se, but I mean, but what does one do when you've sort of put in all that work and you feel like, oh, I just did all this work and now, they don't want it. So what would you do with that? Would you,
Oh, no, I can, yeah, well, that story actually was rejected. It was my first ever rejection.
Oh, really?
It was. I and a lot of people are going to like roll their eyes at this. I have only been published since January last year.
So that was the first step.
And that January was the first. Yeah, that back in January was the first thing I had out, and I was not rejected until November at the end of the year, and that was for a Crystal Lake anthology. But I made it into like the top, and I just missed the cutoff, like ever so slightly, I was just proud of myself to make it that far with a big publishing company, and I was overwhelmed with how far I got. And the editor, who is Kenneth Kane, wrote me a really, really lovely email telling me about my story and why it didn't make it in. So more often than not, if you're being rejected by somebody, they will reject you in an email. Or they'll message you depending on how you've done it. Normally, you'll get a bit of feedback. Don't message the editor back. Don't ask them anymore.
Why would you? I mean, I know why, but tell me.
I will. Yeah, don't message them back, because if you've sent a book, or if you sent a story off to an anthology, you will be one of probably 300 or 400 people that have sent off for these anthologies more often than not. Certainly if you've applied to an open call, or it's a larger book, or it's a publishing company that gets lots and lots of stuff, and you have to consider that this person will get a million emails, hundreds and hundreds of emails, and if they've rejected you, that's kind of the end of it with that story. You're not going to be able to message them and convince them. If they've sent you an email saying, we like your story, but if you do this, maybe it would work better, then, make the changes. If you really want it in this book, look into your story, look at changes, look at what you're willing to adapt, then message them back. But if they've said, thank you very much, your story isn't right for here, don't message them back. Take the advice, walk away from that book, walk away from that person. You don't need to contact them again. They've said their piece. If you're contacting them again, you're trying to get into a conversation with somebody that doesn't want to make a conversation about this book, about this story. That's when you go, okay, do I need to improve this story? What advice have I been given? So with my story, which is called Abyssal Fluid, I received some fantastic feedback. I wasn't asked to make any changes to it. It just didn't make the cut. So I looked around for other anthologies. There wasn't anything around at the time, and then a book was mentioned to me by a friend. They said, you know, I might be doing an anthology. I'm looking for some stories for that. Would you have something, or would you be interested in looking into it? And I sort of said, you know, if you are interested in me writing for it, I do have a story that's not anywhere at the moment. I'm looking for a home for it. Would you take a look? And you look around for other anthologies. You network with people. You look for more opportunities, and within the right vein. You don't want to spot an anthology that's based on, for example, weather, and send them anything you've got just because you want to get rid of the story. You want to get the story published. You've got to go with what's there. So I mean, that story is sitting with a publisher at the moment. He'll take it. He won't take it. I don't know. It would be fantastic if he did. I'm quite a humble person when it comes to my writing, but I know that's a good story. Sorry, I'm getting the hiccups now because I'm talking too much.
That's okay.
It's the wine as well. The wine is not helping. I needed wine today. I've had a very, very good day, but I wanted some wine.
So we're having, wait a minute. So last time we were having, well, I wasn't having, which I find to be kind of a little wanting at the moment. Then you were having cider. I was watching you have cider.
Today's a wine day.
Now you're having. So what are you drinking?
I'm drinking a Merlot from a glass that I was bought by an ex-boyfriend's mother several years ago, and it's great because I'm incredibly clumsy, and this glass won't fall over, so I can put it down. It's a tipsy glass, so if you get drunk and you put it down, it just kind of rolls around, and you don't spill your wine or your drink or anything anywhere.
So is that basically so is that the equivalent of like the remember in the 70s and well, I
won't remember in the 70s. I was born in 1988.
But if you know your sort of tchotchke history, there were these like coffee mugs that came out when I was a kid, and everybody had them in the late 70s and into the 80s. Basically, it looked like an inverted funnel, right, with a coffee mug at the top, and basically it was like pie plate sized. You know what I mean? At the bottom, so it was like this coffee mug that was impossible to tip over. And it was really obnoxious. And they ended up in DS9. It was the coffee mugs that they used in DS9, if you remember those Fractaccino mugs. Okay, so basically this is the equivalent for the wine, right? Like you just can't knock it over. No,
it has a little stand as well, so if I want to like sit it upright, I can. But most of the time it's just like I can put it down, it doesn't fall over, and I'm very happy with that because I'm clumsy. I am terribly, terribly clumsy. People will probably have seen on my Instagram and things the amount of bruises I get covered in because I've got a genetic condition that makes me and being broken and stuff. And I'm also clumsy, so more often than not, I'm black and blue from walking into stuff and then bruising really, really badly. So yeah, having things that help me not fall over and not drop things and not knock things over.
Absolutely.
I'm just clumsy.
I
killed your train of thought.
Yes, I know. What were we going? There we go.
You've got all different. You've got that thing now.
I have the thing, but it's not the right one.
You have the thing with like a name on it and stuff. We were talking about what happens when you're rejected from a book.
I am gonna, by the way. And this is the fun of live YouTube television, where people don't have all their shit together. I'm about to email you that.
We've done live stuff for years, though. Now,
well, that's correct. That's correct. But I'm gonna email you at your media Gmail account graphic, and then I'll tell you how to load it in because I just realized if anybody doesn't know who you, at least it's probably a good form to
have people know what my name is.
That's correct.
It used to be all you for a while. That works. It work anyway. But we were talking about rejections.
So yeah, so then so let's say you've been rejected. You are not being told like, hey, if you just did X, Y, Z, it's definitely been rejected. What's the next step in your what would you suggest to people? But like, what is your personal what would you do?
What would I do? I'd go and reassess my story. If I've not been given any feedback as to why it's been rejected, I go to, okay, there is either something seriously wrong with my story, or it really, really does not fit with what they wanted. That's my story. I'd have a look over it again, and see if there were any areas that jumped out at me that needed improving. You know, had I sent it off in a rush? Had I not really paid attention to what they wanted? And I'd look at the story again, and if I couldn't see anything myself that needed improving, I'd then send it to somebody that I would trust to be critical with me. I mean, I'm talking quite loudly, I think. I know that
you're fine.
A lot of people out there don't handle criticism too well.
Yes, I've heard that.
Criticism, but when it comes to my writing, I want somebody who is going to turn around to me and say, Pippa, this is shit. You can do so much better. Please just take it apart. And I've had people do that for me. They said, look, you know, the start of his story, it needs to be gone. Just remove it. You know, nobody needs this filler. You know, it should start somewhere punchy. It should, I mean, that's the one thing I would always say. The advice I was given is when you're having to reassess one of your stories is if you're not starting in the action, in a short story, then you've gone wrong straight off. You should be starting with something happening, something that pulls the reader in. It's like the nine ladies story. I could have started the story with the point where it says, you know, we don't know when the first symbol appeared, blah blah blah, but there's no action there. So I started it off sort of at the end of the story and brought it back to the beginning because there's a bit more action there. It's a bit more thematic. So yeah, I mean, the first thing you should do, assess your story, send it to somebody who's going to be critical and tell you, look, this doesn't flow, this doesn't work. I don't understand this. But I mean, you kind of hope if you're sending it off to anybody for a book, they will at least give you some advice as to what needs to be done with it. Personally, I've not had a problem where anyone's turned around to me and not given me a reason why it needs to be improved or a reason why it doesn't work. I've only ever had 2 rejections, and they were both at the end of last year. And one was for Crystal Lake, and the other one was for Behind the Mask, which has come out now. And I would have loved to have got into that book because it's got like a Clive Barker story in it, and Edgar Allan Poe. And for me, it was because my story for that book was rushed because I had 3 days in which to get it done. And because the editor told me that it needed to be expanded, it shouldn't be a short story, it should be a novella because there's so much more to tell.
So in that case, somebody actually really was very honest about what they thought you should do.
Oh yeah, I've honestly had
because not everybody's going to do that, as you were saying. I mean, and nor are they obligated to do so. Frankly, I mean,
yeah,
you know, they've got a lot of things to do. So would you consider yourself lucky and or at least you know, fortunate to have that kind of experience where an editor actually said, yeah, we're not going to take it, but actually here's why, and here's what I think is really good about it, you know, that kind of thing.
I think I've been incredibly fortunate. I think my entire career to date has been incredibly fortunate, and I put it down to networking, putting me in the right place at the right time, meeting the right people. Being nice, being humble will get you so far. If you're just nice to people and you take on board advice without discrediting it because I mean, you should never ever stop learning. I mean, you may think you are on top of your game, you're the best you're going to ever be, and there is always someone better than you. You will never be the number one of anything. Nobody is. There will always be somebody that knows more than you, has learnt more than you, that's worked harder than you, and that's okay. You know, that's fine. It means that there is this opportunity for you to improve. I have books I'm writing that I was recommended to get by somebody who is a better author than me, and that advice was invaluable, and I thoroughly appreciate it. And I probably wouldn't be as good as I am now without their help, but I still have a huge way to go to get where I want to be. I mean, my editing skills are shite, you know, for want of a better word. I really struggle with editing.
Although universally amongst quality writers, with very few exception. I think maybe, I don't know, I mean, Wharton maybe didn't have an editor. Certainly, I wouldn't be surprised if Gay Talese or, oh God, some of the ones that came out of reporting first may not have ultimately, when they became fiction writers. You know, I'm talking about mid-20th century authors. There's a few that didn't have editors, but basically almost everybody I've ever seen an interview with says that the editor is the unsung hero of any novel, and it is almost impossible for any really, really good author to get through without the assistance of that, right? Sorry.
I was like, oh, we've got theme music.
That's my phone.
Yeah, please, if you want to get there with your story, you need a fresh set of eyes. Whether it's a paid editor, unpaid editors. I mean, there's not a lot of money in this industry, so a lot of people work on a barter system, which is what I generally do. Favor for favor, you get jobs done. But for the Abyssal Fluid story, I paid an editor for that.
Yeah,
and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did, because she picked out things. I mean, it's Teresa Derwin, and she does editing for people. I think she's not doing any at the moment because she's not been very well. But I've paid her to edit for me before because she does it, and she did a fantastic job, and I was incredibly happy with the editing she did for me. A fantastic lady. That's the only time I've paid for an editor so far. A lot of time I will say, you know, I struggle with editing. I have dyslexia. I struggle with sentence structure. So I will write sentences backwards. I'll put the reaction before the action and not realize I've done it. Or I will, it's like lengthy bits. So it's like, instead of going, that man went on a walk, it would be, that is the walk that the man went on.
Yes.
And I won't realize that I've written it sort of the long way around. It doesn't need to be that long, but I won't notice that I've done that. And
that's really interesting, because also, is there anything about that is that is informed, or, you know, lack of a better word, informed by also dialectic or other kinds of regional language differences in the UK? Is that also creeping into there, or is it merely just how your brain works? It's a kind of a neurological thing, because I can imagine either one could be at play, right? Depending on where you're
I think it's neurological. For me, I'm I've just got a response to that. I'm no good at words. Yes, I struggle. I struggle with words sometimes. Sentence structures
what's the oh God, I can't remember his name, but a comedy writer he still writes a lot of books. Me Talk Pretty One Day, that book.
I like that.
It's a title of a comedy anthology he wrote.
I refer to getting into that situation if I'm writing gobbledygook and it's sort of I've written sentences backwards that I've not noticed. I call it word salad. I've just got a load of word salad and it's just thrown together. It's been tossed together. It really needs sorting out.
You know, word salad is an actual medical, or not, it's not a medical term. It's more like a slang for glossolalia, which is a definite problem with sometimes with psychotics or schizophrenia, where it can be on its own a dysfunction where the connectivity between intent and what comes out of the mouth is completely different, and the words are literally, it's like random words coming out, or at least phrases that have they sound like they could mean something, but not anything that we would understand. And so,
I just want word salad is a verbal diarrhea by my mother.
Oh, great! Yes, right. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but keep going.
No. You're doing stuff.
I have to respond to a friend who was asking me some questions about my health issue.
I'm responding to questions, so it's all good.
So let's just take a second to take care of that business.
Yeah, it never stops, does it?
This is where it gets the nitty gritty of
the nitty gritty of having iPads everywhere and phones and iPads, and
well,
because I don't have like a desk or an office or anything.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you don't?
No, I'm sat on my bed. I work from my bed. I have a huge bedroom and I have a ginormous bed, and I just plonk everything on my bed and work from here. Work from here.
I figured maybe you'd have like a desk or laptop and then, you know, a few smaller devices or something like that.
Yeah, well, my laptop I have on a little stand, and then I have an iPad, which I use for messaging. I have a phone that I use for other types of messaging. I actually got a new full-size iPad the other day, which will be used for the Google Guide stuff. Used for myself and Leanna. We'll be using that. At the moment, I'm just doing all the setup for it for us to both be able to access for doing stuff. So it means it will be able to be a little bit more effective, because I haven't done any Google Guide stuff for a couple months again, because having time with the writing, with everything else, it just all gets in the way. And yeah, I like working from here, because there's like everything ends and then I can just put on Stranger Things for the millionth day in a row. I think I have a bit of an addiction. I've watched Stranger Things seasons 1 and 2 on a loop every single day since it released on the 27th of October.
You know, it's the show that I have on loop. If you want to talk about that,
Star Trek.
I bet we could go back and forth. No, it's been Mindhunter.
I've heard so much about that being fantastic, and I've not seen it at all yet.
It's Mindhunter and the first season of True Detective are two shows where I could literally watch it every other day or something, and it would be always stimulating and fresh. And everybody
I used to do that with Buffy. I used to do that with Buffy, but
sure.
It's supernatural stuff. Stranger Things, I love, and I think I love it because the way my characters interact in my novel is so like the characters in Stranger Things. And my novel was written before Stranger Things existed, so I've been writing it for years. But I mean, my characters aren't as young as that, but it's they're young adults, but it's not a young adult novel at all. Mm-hmm. Just the way they interact with each other, they're just goofy. I love the fact that my characters are a mess.
Well, I mean,
I have a favorite character.
You do.
I wish he existed. He'd be so much fun to talk to. He's just so awkward. It's just great.
So then it sounds. I mean, because Bill and I want to for people who are just watching this, they're only in Pippa's world. The person that I co-create the comic I've been working on for a long time. We have we describe our process of having made it up and wanting to do it, and any of the other things we want to do in the future. And it's not original; it's not an original concept, but we always do follow the precept that like we're making things that we desperately wish were, you know, available to just buy. Like it's almost like, well, I guess we're going to have to write and draw this book because no one else will do it, right? And we wish that we didn't have to do it in a way, right? Because it'd be great if it could just be like where you just plunk down the money. Is that an impulse for you? Are you writing stuff that where like not only do you have sort of like original impulses or something historic or some matter out there catches your eye and you kind of reconstitute it in a story? Everybody does that, but is there a part of your process that is like, my God, why hasn't anybody done this? And I really, really wish that I could have this story to read, and I guess I'm going to have to write that story. Like, does that come up for you?
Yes, the novel, yes. I mean, that was just... It's a story that I would love to see a film of, or I wish somebody else had written it and I could have read it. My short stories, they're inspired by random things. Like I said, the story of It's in Abyssal Fluid was, I don't know if I mentioned this in the thing last time, came about from an old lady on a bus that I was, because I take the bus to work because I don't know how to drive because I still haven't learned, and I will learn before I turn 30 this year. I will learn how to drive. I had to take the bus home from work and it was really busy and I was stood up, and at the front of the bus was an old lady with a walking stick and a ginormous backpack, and she looked fantastic. She was in like all sorts of different colors and had like ribbons in her hair, and I was just like, hey, where? Because I will talk to anybody.
Sure.
I attract weirdos in
No
public,
way.
and if you were ever out in public with me, they just make a beeline.
No way.
But yeah, I attract weirdos. But this lady was fascinating, so I just walked up to her and went, hey, you're really interesting looking. Where have you been? You know, big backpack and everything. She was like, I am champing. And I was like, what is champ? Exactly, what is champing? It's camping in derelict churches. She was traveling the UK. She came from Kansas, and she was traveling the UK, and she was camping in derelict churches around the UK. And she was traveling on the bus to get to a part of a town centre to get on another bus and travel to another area and go and camp. And she told me that she'd stayed at a church the night before, and normally there's a tour of people doing it. And there's like 5 or 6 people will stay at these churches. And she said the ones before, the night before, she'd stayed on her own, and it was really quite scary, and the church was very weird. And so I was like, I just turned around to her and I was like, I write stories and I love your story, and I hope you don't mind, but you're going to end up in one of my stories.
Right. I'm going to steal you.
I honestly, she was fascinating. And so that became the concept for that. I mean, that story was originally called Champing. And it was a whole different concept, but I wanted to have somebody that was camping in a church, and I changed the concept several times over, and it ended up with what it is now. And I'm not going to tell you anything about it until I get this book, this story in a book somewhere. But it's my favorite story I've ever written.
So that's a case like a number of these short stories where you're literally getting stimulated by something, even if it's the kernel of something, goes in. And the short story is this, it immediately explodes in your head. You know that there's a through line, and that's your way of converting this stimulation into something creative that has a full story around it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's little things. I mean, I was saying earlier, I was having a conversation about writing earlier. I have a box of note cards that I was given as a birthday gift last year. And anytime I come up with an idea or a concept jumps out at me, I write it down on one of these cards, whether I have a use for it now or not. And when I'm contacted about an anthology, or I'm invited to write for something, I get this little box out, and I don't know where it is at the moment. I think it might be downstairs in the lounge.
Oh, by the way, Mike Pilgrim is saying, does the church in your story have a name?
The church in the story is called St. Andrews, I think. I think I called it St. Andrews in this book.
Okay.
But the actual church itself, the church that appears in several parts of it, is based on one in my village that I came from, which is called a village called Albrighton, and the church is called St. Mary's. And it's a it's an old church. I mean, the village is in the Domesday Book, so it's from 1066 minimum. So the village is over 1,000 years old, and I do love the church. It's a very strange little one. I actually have a load of photos of it I took when I was looking at organising art for my novel. And I went around and went on a dog walk with my mother, and went around all these weird nature reserves and all this old Duffy village and took lots of pictures. And the church is one of the places I've got loads of pictures of and want to do something with the art at some point. But yeah, so that church is St. Andrews in the book, and St. Mary's in real life. And
taking that stuff. Actually, I want to. I had a question, but now I have a different question. Because you mentioned,
I will answer any questions you want to ask.
Right. Well, it's just you mentioned where you live, right, and mentioned 1,000-year-old.
Yes. Yes.
Right. It's got at least a history about that long. So that would be amongst some of the oldest historically known locations in the UK, then, right? If it's that
yes,
old.
the village I grew up in is an incredibly old village. Yeah, when you're going sort of back to it's probably not one of the oldest places, but it's registered in a book, so it's at least 1,000 years old.
Right. So how does that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that it's a strange one. It's actually called. Its full title is Albrighton, Home of the English Rose. because it's got these world famous rose gardens attached to it. And I think in January last year they discovered what they called a Templar Knight cave under one of the farmers' fields down the road in the village, and it's like a 700-year-old cave with like carvings in the walls and like bits carved out for candles and weird all sorts of things down there. And it's awesome. It's a great village.
So we got to do two things at once. I'm going to have a follow-up question with that, and also we need you to get that overlay in place. So I emailed you. It says graphic.
Emails. Okay.
So
stuff, and I will open this thing.
And I'll work you through.
Oh, but I have many emails today.
Yeah. Then the other thing would be, so how much does your particular unique situation, where you live, where you're from, etc., how does that inform the work, or does it? It doesn't have to, but does it?
The town that's in my in the books is based on the village, and the town I live in now, and the village that I lived in is what my town in my I'm trying to word. My words are failing. I can't word right now. I'm trying to. Okay,
do your best.
I'm trying to remember. Oops, how I did this last. It's a toolbox, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. Yeah.
When we did this, it's a year ago that we did this.
Fourth from the top on the pop out on the left hand side.
Not on mine. Hangout Toolbox is a blue thing, isn't it?
It is now.
Custom overlay, upload overlay. I'm glad I remember this.
Yeah, it's good, right?
Yeah, since we've done this, I have one of those memories.
So how do you do your stuff in Ghoul Guides? Are you using using like OBS or some other third? Like, are you using a third? Are you editing video and putting in graphics with another program or something?
I record my Ghoul Guide stuff completely in its entirety. I don't edit it. That is one take. And you
don't do a lower third or a graphic or anything.
No. I literally record it on this.
Okay.
And then I just publish it straight up, because the way I see it is
we're not seeing your overlay yet.
No, I'm trying to do it. Custom overlay.
There we are.
There you go.
Now you're a person on the show.
I can do stuff. I'm a person on the show. Look, it's got my name and everything.
It's got everything.
I have a name.
We do.
There we go.
You have a number.
I have a number. I don't know. It was like tattoo 11. God, I love that show. I mean, I have watched it straight for like 73 days now, and someone's gonna, at some point, Netflix are gonna contact my parents, because it's their Netflix, and say to them, we just wanted to check that you're okay, because you've watched the same TV show for 73 days in a row.
Right.
And we just want to check that mentally you're still stable. Sometimes I'm mentally stable, sometimes I'm not, That might be
we're all artists on this bus, which means that we're pretty messed, potentially messed up. That's all right.
So yes.
So it definitely has a big impact on your. It's had a big impact on you overall to have that kind of potent cultural history right around you.
Yeah, I mean the village is it's a spectacular village. If anybody ever visits anywhere, Albrighton in Shropshire is beautiful. Or Albrighton near Wolverhampton, there's two Albrightons, so you gotta be careful. But it's just gorgeous little village, and there's so much in it, and it's attached to an RAF base. It has a museum, and there's just so many old buildings, and I just adore the place. I mean, I lived there for, and people like around here don't sound like me. I'm a child of the RAF, so I've moved all over the country.
What do they call?
I lived in Albrighton for like. I'm a RAF brat.
So they call it a brat too over there.
Yeah, I'm a RAF brat, because I was born in Oxford, lived in Elgin in Scotland, and lived in Hampshire, and gained my accent by the age of 7, and then it hasn't changed. Right. So for 22 years I've sounded the same.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Albrighton, I mean, even in the novel, I ended up taking the names of the places. So the rose garden is called David Austin Roses, and he provides roses for the Queen and things like that. And the village is Albrighton. So there's the start of my story starts in a school, which is called Austin Albrights, having taken the two names and combined them. The town is called Alnwick.
Right.
But yeah, it's a combination of the where I live now and where I grew up, because there's just so many beautiful things. Though there's a few other places I've visited in the last couple of years, and I've stolen parts of them. So I spent some time in a library in August, and I've stolen that library for one of my novellas. So I've stolen the library.
So let's get into something else. And we got some questions here, so I can get through these finally.
Yeah, go for it.
If that's all right.
Yeah.
And if you have a direction you want to go in too, by the way, you just tell me.
All of them.
Okay. So Andrews the Viking asks, question for both. Who would you want to narrate the audiobook of your biography?
Oh, God. Well, everyone should just answer Morgan Freeman to that.
Probably.
You know, probably Morgan Freeman. What was the thing that came out recently? It was like, for New Year, she promised that she was going to behave herself. But what actually happened is she like fought a raccoon or something like that, you know?
Right.
Morgan Freeman or Tom Hiddleston.
Oh,
because he has a lovely voice.
My roommate is both in love with Mr. Hiddleston and Mr. Cumberbatch. Although I think Mr. Cumberbatch has more credibility and sexy love vibes from her. I think that's who wins. And one of the reasons is because of Hiddleston's love choices she does not approve of.
Oh, yeah. I call him Tom Hiddlebum because he gets his ass out in Crimson Peak. But yeah, no, Tom Hiddleston every time. Right. Definitely. Benedict Cumberbatch looks like an otter.
Well, he does. He does. But, you know, obviously a lot of people must love the otters, right?
They must really love otters. Otters are cute. Otters are lovely. Just not in a romantic way.
Right, yes. I don't love you like that. I don't love you that way.
No, I don't love you like an animal.
Right.
But yeah, so I'm going to stick with Morgan Freeman for narrating my life. Would be Morgan Freeman.
I'm
just imagining it. Now it's like, you know.
Oh, sure.
She thought she would have a good day today, but then she slept in poo.
Although I would say I think there's room for Dame Edna, perhaps, but
Dame Edna Everidge, fantastic. That would be brilliant.
Right? I mean, you could hear it and you know.
Oh God, definitely. But every line I don't end up with like, you know, you gained a poinsettia.
Right. I think for me, well, here's the thing. If I wanted to do it for laughs, there's no doubt that I would have Shatner do it.
Oh, it'd be so broken though. If like, it would just be like,
it would be great.
Well, and he went to the shops today, and yes, he brought something else.
You know, the funny thing is he doesn't actually talk that way. I mean, not like that. He does have a very affected cadence, but it's not that way. It's a different thing. He's an exceptional interviewer, actually. He's done 1 million interview shows, different networks, different times.
Oh, he's
he's a fantastic interviewer, actually. But let's see. So if it was that, I think if it was to be serious, though, boy, I'd have to think about it.
Being serious.
Well, not serious. I just mean like, in other words, like a sort of a straight up, you know, reading. Like, I think you get Shatner to read your biography because you want
if I
people to
wanted
actually
a straight up reading, Helen Mirren.
Yeah, see, I could see that for sure. Yeah.
Helen Mirren would be my choice. Oh, I can't remember what her real name is, but Helen Mirren.
Or Kate Blanchett, maybe, or something like that, right?
Oh, Kate Blanchett would be nice as well.
Great voice.
I sound a bit more like Kate Winslet. Maybe Kate Winslet.
You don't want to do that to yourself. No.
Okay, what's the next question?
The next question is, oh, that's right. It was from Facebook. So Jack MT was asking, how do you create your characters? Which is probably the $1 million question of anybody who is aspiring or in the early games of like making their fiction or whatever it is that they're doing. So,
my main characters come from me. They're mostly based on me, my habits, my horrible things that I do.
Okay.
Which is probably why they all get killed off quite a lot.
But are your characters also women all the time, or is gender doesn't work into it necessarily?
No, I will write both sexes. I will write in first person perspective, third person perspective. It's nice to write it from a male point of view and things like that. My first few stories I wrote were all. I mean, my first story I ever wrote was from the perspective of a woman. The wine has stolen my ability to word, but no, I like to write from both. But most of my characters they're supposed to learn from the things they do in life, and none of them do, and they end up ending horribly because that's what's a little bit more realistic.
Which is a universal.
Yeah, people always have people learning from their mistakes, and it's like I don't. In one of my stories, I have somebody not learning from their mistakes and going to scoop out the eyeballs of their newly born son.
Sure.
Which is nice.
Which we're really hoping is a metaphor for something that doesn't involve.
He has the choice between giving up his life for his son or becoming this selfish, horrible man who's already lived his life over and accidentally killed his wife, and he still chooses to go towards his newborn son with a spoon.
Wow.
That story came out really early last year.
And I remember the very first one that you showed Bill and I, which was
Scarred.
Yeah,
you liked Scarred. I was quite glad you liked Scarred.
It was good. It was just good. In fact, it was one of the stories too that I thought, boy, it'd be super easy to like draw this. You know, like it'd be super.
Oh yeah. Well, the nine ladies one doesn't involve anything supernatural. So that one's easy. The one in Sparks, that would be really hard to draw. That's got loads of weird electrical creatures.
Yeah. I think Nine Ladies though could be a very interesting graphic novella kind of thing. You know,
well, it would be
if it's done the right way. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I have another story that I don't know if I could stand to see it being created in art because it's erotic horror, and I just think it probably is very not suitable to ever be turned into.
Well, you'd be surprised. I mean, there's been some pretty graphic, even disturbing stuff that's been done in terms of comic art.
It's a succubus going around trying to find the right mouthful, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
But anyway, so my other characters, I have two characters in my novel that are based on friends. So one of them is based on my housemate, my best friend Leanna, and the other one is based on a friend of mine called Dan.
And Leanna is the other half of Ghoul Guides, yes?
Yes, Leanna is the other half of Ghoul Guides, and she there's a character in my novel called Chloe, who Leanna is based on, and Chloe is she's a lot of fun. She's really sweet and nice and wants to be really overly helpful, and she's kind of because of her age and because she's passed some tests, she's been given this position of power, and she's really not ready for it. So she's having to learn how to do everything else with the people that are far younger than her. So she's like this 25-year-old in a position of power with these much, much older council members who are in their 40s and 50s and 60s and things like that. And she's this sort of 20-year-old who's muddling along. And I've written a scene recently where she's turned up to these people learning how to defend themselves with weapons. And they're like, oh, you know, are you teaching us? And she's like, no, I'm not allowed to touch weapons. I'm here to learn, you know. She's a really fun character to write.
So what happens with writing characters that are based on yourself or others, as opposed to, you know, whole cloth inventing characters? Does that ever become a trap? Is there ever anything confining about it, or do you still find it to be a really good source of material?
I find it easier to write stories based on people that I know or myself, rather than creating them out of nothing. When you create them out of nothing, they're so depersonalized that you find it hard to emote with them when you write them. When it's characters based on me, I do all sorts of horrible things to them because more often than not, they have habits I wish I didn't have, and they're punished for them. It's kind of a form of self-flagellation where I create characters that are punished for my misdeeds that I have. So in in my story from Sparks, my character wastes electricity. I am terrible for doing. She leaves things plugged in, she leaves things turned on, and she's punished for that crime.
So then writing, I guess, is like a kind of self-medicinal opus Dei for you to be part of,
I
right?
bear my sins in my words.
Yeah. You remember?
I bear my sins for all.
And do people, well, do you think that the positive response from your writing is even if they're not aware of this, because they're most likely they're not, but do you think that is what gives characters resonance with somebody reading your stories who have expressed, like, I really like this? Like, do you think that that's part of what's going on there?
I think that the characters feel more real because they're taken from real life rather than trying to create. I think especially when you're trying to create a character where you don't take them from real life, you either write them to be too flawed because you're trying too hard to make them real, or they're too perfect and it's somebody you would never ever meet. They're always, beautiful, but clumsy, and they always get the man and everything like that. Whereas it's like, I'd just much rather write somebody who's a bit dumpy with frizzy hair and isn't very good at stuff, but they're trying hard to get there, and
Right.
People can relate more to those characters. They can relate more to a character that's flawed than they can to somebody who's this epitome of beauty and somehow is this fragile creature and can't do it. It just doesn't work for me at all.
But you don't think that one can, out of whole cloth, create flawed characters that don't have some analog, even if it's just in the back of your head, with an existing person that you either know or have read about or whatever? Like for you,
I think I think you definitely can. I think I'm saying that it's harder to. And it works.
Oh, I meant
in my opinion, works less to create a character where there is no bearing in something that you know or that you've seen.
Yeah. I'm actually speaking only for your process, so of course.
I mean, people probably have, and I will probably get loads of people going, no, don't do it like that. Do it like this. I'm like, no, but this is how I work.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, gosh, I'm trying to straighten out my legs.
I do think that you're right, because in general, even if the character is almost tangentially only based on a real thing, it has, like, it's almost like to back up just slightly. It's like all things in really good art, particularly more so in genre fiction, which is of course what we're all doing. I do it, and Bill does it, and you do it, and your author, it seems like most of your author friends that I've heard about anyway, and the people doing the anthologies, they're all doing genre fiction of some kind, right? Even if it's like off genre, like bizarro or weird fiction. If there's no verisimilitude, which is exactly the word we're going for here, right? If there's no verisimilitude, whether it's comic art with the graphic and then also the story, or prose, whichever, film, whatever it is, if the verisimilitude is lacking, then even if you don't know why it doesn't work, it falls apart. It's static. It's two-dimensional. It doesn't have quite the same life. But verisimilitude will cause things to erupt into lifefulness, if that's to make up a word, right? Yeah. You can't do Stranger Things unless major work is done on the environments. And so the verisimilitude of that show, more than anything, other than just how people really act in real life, is the environment. If you don't have the tumblers, the wall hangings, the cabinet door handles, the way that a refrigerator door would be cluttered, if those things are not done accurately, then that Stranger Things can't be depicted in 1980 something. It would have to be a contemporary story. Right.
Yeah, it's kind of uncanny valley sort of thing. Where you watch a film or something where the character realizes that something's not quite right because things are too perfect.
Yes.
You know, if there's not quite enough
Vanilla
flaws
Sky,
or something,
for
just
instance.
doesn't seem. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
It's just.
And that's a perfect example of that kind of thing.
Mm.
Somebody
So what
asked,
was the other thing I was thinking of?
Jack actually asked, what's the meaning of the word? And the meaning of the word is the trueness, realness, like the appearance of something being plausible and authentic for whatever that thing is. So like if you're doing a TV show set in the 80s, it's got to really feel like the 80s. Anachronisms and other stuff cannot be in it, otherwise it's gonna jolt you out of it, particularly if you know the era. And even Stranger Things has some pretty severe anachronisms in it once in a while, although many of them are actually dialogue related, not so much environmental.
Oh, you know, I've noticed it's the swearing. It's the amount of swearing. I mean, I'm pro. I mean, I swear like a trucker. But my question is, children in the 80s, were they as foul-mouthed as children today? I don't know.
No, we were terrible.
No,
we were terrible.
You were terrible, were you?
Yeah. But it's actually particular phrases and particular conjunctions and contractions of words that just people didn't really say the same way. And those are missing, but that's because the people writing it, I mean, I know the two brothers were around, but they're not, I don't think, in their 50s. I think they were much younger. I don't know that all the writers.
Duffer Brothers. I think they're probably my age, to be honest.
Right. Mindhunter at least has the advantage of, I mean, he's my age. We were not around. We were little kids when Mindhunter starts. But, and that's the guy, David Fincher, what's the movie that got him rocketing? The crime movie, the What's in the Box, Seven. Fincher is exceptional.
Such a good movie.
Yeah, and he's exceptional at making things like verisimilitude work, right? But like, I think that by having something to hold on to, like you're saying, it's the characters are all based on myself, aspects of myself. They're based on aspects of people that I know. Even if it's just the fact that you've done a lot of historical research on somebody who was around at the same time in your story and has the same modalities or frailties, and you're in your head you're saying, well, actually this character is really Winston Churchill, or this character is really Golda Meir, but it's reconstituting Golda Meir as the mom in a household full of kids, who are mutants, right? But you can still say in your head, like, oh, but who's the character based on? Why does she have this like authenticity of this like sort of grim but motherly kind of Yenta type who would clearly at a moment's notice like call in all the guns and blow away anybody trying to hurt her kids? Well, I was always fascinated by Golda Meir and her tenure as the Prime Minister of Israel and her ability to, like the sort of, being one of the first of the primordial leaders of the state of Israel, and how she with one hand was a very motherly Yenta type, but then in the other hand was a sword. And so this is basically like I took that and I kind of put it in there. If you do that, it just like pops everything into place in a way that like having to make it out of whole cloth can be quite a chore, and an unnecessary chore, I think, right? Like it's kind of unnecessary labor to try to completely invent something without some kind of background elements like that, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. Or it's the same with the. I mean, you're setting the scene. You're setting the scene for the theme, and then the character has to be themed. But it's the same with writing music. You can't honestly write anything without saying it's got an influence somewhere.
Right. And just to a side note, I think your original is it right that your original education was somewhere in your educational history?
Composer. I'm a trained classical composer and singer.
Right. Right. I don't remember in which stage of your higher education that is, but I know that
I have a degree. I have an honors degree as a trained composer.
Right. So I just wanted the audience to, in case you hadn't watched the first episode of the first part of this,
No, I have a degree and stuff.
So the lady knows of what she speaks. Okay, and
Yes,
parenthetical.
I know music. I've been able to read music since I was 7, and
Right.
I've been composing for years.
So go on, please.
Yeah, no, as I say, it's the same. I think they say the last original chord, or the last original musical component was, or sort of creation was the end of the 70s with punk. Anything since then, I think every single chord combination or every sort of combination has been done. Everything now is just being done again. You know, it's the same with learning anything. You can't create anything new anymore. You can have new ideas, you can have new ways of working with things,
yes.
but you can't create anything new because everything is influenced by something else. You'd have to create it in a vacuum, having never had a knowledge of something.
Oh, very much, and that's the case with any of the arts. And I think that it's either naivete, youth, or intellectual dishonesty that allows for people to argue against that truth, because that is the truth. I mean, you can go to Joseph Campbell, you can look at the people who taught you that theory in music, you can look at any of the arts, and you can look at any of the criticism and the analysis of art and storytelling, which I consider music to be storytelling also.
Oh God, yeah.
Right. It is the reconstitution of core ideas and tropes. And we wouldn't have the word tropes unless we knew that there were tropes. You know what I mean? It's kind of like one of those things. It's like
saying there's a trope in this is a trope itself.
In fact, yeah, because really, what are we doing? We're engaging in a postmodern trope, right? And so, unless we're going to talk about like postmodern, either the application of postmodernism as sort of inversion or rejection or like real true experimentation, short of that, it's all going to be reconstitution, right? And hopefully in a good way, right? Like hopefully in a way that is entertaining, positive, has some redeeming artistic or social value, right?
Everything's influenced by something else.
Particularly with genre fiction. Again, coming back to genre fiction. What are we going to do? I mean, it's like, you know, you can say postmodern Western, you can say postmodern horror, you can say folk horror revival, but you're still talking about the subject matter of whatever the genre is, right? So you're
still confined by the boundaries. I write supernatural horror. Right. I'm confined by those boundaries somewhat. I mean, they can't tell me what to write, but if you want it to be considered supernatural horror, supernatural fiction, whatever, there are almost not rules, guidelines, as they say in Pirates of the Caribbean. There's guidelines that you kind of tend to stick within when it comes to that kind of stuff.
And do you, and because I have an answer for myself, but you don't find that like bad, or even though the word is confines, I think is accurate. I mean, that's not a bad thing, right? I mean,
not at all. If it's
right.
Humans like categories. We like to organize things. We like lists. Right. We like the boundaries. They make us happy. They make you comfortable knowing that you can put a label on something.
Speaking of labels, Anders the Viking asks, this is very, very fortuitous. Do you find it difficult to name your characters? As in, do you have preconceived ideas of who they are in your stories, or are the names influenced by the personalities?
I have a book of names, and I open it and I flip through and I stab my finger down and I go, nope. And then I do that about 3 or 4 more times until I get a name I like. So
you will actually try to stay within the convention of existing naming.
Yes, I don't make up names.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't make up new names. I struggle when people use really stupid words. No, I mean, it sounds like really offensive. When I see people that give their characters really unusual names that don't make any sense, or are just dragged out of nowhere, or it just feels like
fantasy is probably the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's fantasy. It's exactly what you're going with. I've seen
fantasy is the biggest culprit. Fantasy is the worst culprit, obviously.
I've seen somebody recently who's been advertising their book, and it's hard for me to feel like I want to read it because all of the words related to it feel like gobbledygook.
Right. Now, of course,
I mean, but then it's like I love Lord of the Rings,
right,
and that a lot of that is gobbledygook.
Right, and Dune is
and it's
beautiful.
just,
it's like reading poetry, right? Because
yeah,
you know, I mean, and for two good reasons, right? I mean, like he not only was he dealing with cultures that were far away from our culture in space, but also it was a story taking place 40,000 years in the future. So I think I think it's absolutely fair to say there's going to be a crap load of language and phrasing that is different from what you're used to. And if I don't do that, I'm not going to be legitimate to, again, verisimilitude of this 40,000 years in the future story, right? So I think Frank Herbert probably was doing the right thing.
I had that problem. I actually asked that question when I started writing my novel, was because, well, my characters are from a different world. I posed the question of, do I need to reason as to why my characters speak English? Does people are like, well, no, that's fine. I was like, I've struggled with whether I have my characters swear, because then I'm looking at the English slang and it's like, these characters from a world, why would they use our slang? And I'm sort of sitting there going, do I have to deal with somebody asking me those questions at some point in the future and not having an answer for it?
It's because it shocks you, right? Because you're trying to like fall into a world, and somebody says ain't. Well, I guess ain't actually does go back to Old Middle English, right, or something like that. But what's a better one? Oh, well, you maybe like saying like you're freaky. Like, no, that would be that would punch you right out, right? Or
certainly it would not work.
Slap that down on the table, right? Or you know, that's awesome. No way ever you're going to sell me on a fantasy or another world where people say that's awesome. Like that's not gonna. And I've read it, I've seen it in comics, and I've seen it in other places, and it really throws the shit off, you know. By the way, I just made up a purely made up fantasy name for a female character. Yeah, check this out, okay?
All right.
Ferriea Weldrang. How about that one? Ferriea Weldrang.
Yeah, it's
so cringeworthy, right? Like it's like I'm trying to like make up some, you know.
It sounds close to other things.
It does.
But it's those kind of names, and I'm like, I can't.
You know, like Flint Whistle, Penny Feather, you know, like whatever.
I feel bad feeling bad about it.
I know.
But it's like I had to come up with names for my worlds.
No, it's like, I mean,
of course, things.
Right, you get a little leeway if it's a foreign world, if it's a sword and sandal thing, if it's a fan, you know, if it's what do you call it, Game of Thrones or something, whatever. If it's Tolkien, I mean, you definitely are given more leeway, but you can still. There's so much room for some cringeworthy stuff, isn't there? There's just like
you can have some cringeworthy stuff, but
yeah. By the way, can I share an embarrassing name that I made up when I was a young lad? So my first D&D character I had was what was he? He was a cleric. It was a fighter magic user, and he had fire spell. He had like fireball and stuff. And so his name was Greywood Firefox. How's that?
That's not that bad though. My first I played World of Warcraft. I played World of Warcraft for 6 years. I would play 6 hours because I was addicted to that stuff.
Yeah.
And my first ever this is the thing, is I take names from other stuff.
Sure.
Or I take other. My first ever character was called Letha Beltane.
Yeah, but that's not.
It's pagan holidays. It's pagan seasons just smushed together.
Yeah. So I mean, a person would know would be like eye rolling probably, but it doesn't sound cringy. I think mine definitely wins the cringy sound. Yeah.
I tried not to use cringy names when I played World of Warcraft, and then I was told that certain names I'd use for characters meant different things in different languages. It's like my name means different in a different language, and it's terrible, and I'm not going to repeat it on here. But if you want to find out, look up Pippa in Swedish,
nice,
or Italian,
okay,
and see what it means.
Okay, here's another name. See if you, what do you think of this one? I think it's actually kind of good though. Phlegm the bottom.
No. Yeah, but that would work. That sounds
Right?
like something that
Like
somebody
for a
you
little,
don't like.
like for a
Full of
gnome,
phlegm.
for a gnome or a dwarf or some kind of like.
Oh yeah, no, that would work.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make any sense, but it sounds like something kind of vile and you know, vaguely uncomfortable or whatever.
Phlegm is just an unpleasant word. I struggle with words like moist, dribbly.
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, spongy and yogurt. Don't like moist, dribbly, spongy and yogurt. They make me feel really uncomfortable.
Well, they're very much they're not quite onomatopoetic, but they're kind of there's a mental image of them that they're inexorably linked. You know, it's like the word orange. No matter whether it's the fruit or the color, you're always thinking of both at the exact same time, and you can't unglue it. There's never a way to do it. Whereas blue could literally mean, in context, many different things, whether it's emotional or not. And it doesn't get, it's not like you can't unglue the various different things, but like orange, I think is a good example. I think moist and phlegm are really, really good examples of where there's never going to be an opportunity where those words can ever mean anything but the visual in your head.
Well, it's like if somebody says the word yogurt to me, I just imagine somebody flipping it off a spoon and it just hitting something.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not good.
Interesting. So thanks, Anders, for that. I mean, I hope that whole silly conversation gives us. I mean, for me, I could say that like, well, actually, to break down the second part, because it's like preconceived idea or of who they are in your stories, or like making up a name that is the thing that they are personality wise, I think is kind of I think that's the kind of thing you do when you're a more immature writer. I think that's stuff that happens a lot in kids' books, which actually to a good usage, right? Like for instance, I mean, here's a basic symbol, universal symbol of the type of thing: Snow White, Peter Pan, Cinderella. Now, it's easy to say, oh, but those are just nursery rhymes or whatever. And of course they're going to be that way, but I'm talking about this. No. I mean, those are real stories, right? So I think if you say like in that context, I think it's really helpful, right? Rose Red, you know.
Fighty McStabs a lot. Serial killer name. Probably wouldn't work too well.
Fighty stabs a lot, exactly.
Yeah, Fighty McStabs a lot.
Yeah, I think you know, I really am in Pippa's camp that if you're making names based on, especially contemporary sort of situation. I mean, if you make Bill the miller, you know, and it's set in the Middle Ages, and it's old Will the mill, you know, like, or trying to think of other names that were based on, you know, because in the context of the culture, people often took the surname of their trade, right? That's fine.
Yes, yeah.
But I think if you're talking about a contemporary or semi-contemporary story, and you're setting it in a world that is mostly our world or something, I think making up characters that are like, that have whole new surnames or whole new given names, I think kind of is an immature way to do it. And I think it's not giving it's sort of removing from your character one last bit of reality and grounding that could potentially be there, because you'd say, oh, that's Fred Epstein, or that's, you know, even if it's, you know, Donald Regent, even if it's a very majestic name or whatever, you're still able to kind of grasp it. I think otherwise it's like Pippa was saying, you know, it's Fighty McBlade or whatever, right? You know, and I think it's good to reevaluate maybe how one names their characters. I mean, that's just my opinion, but you know.
Well, it's like two of my characters. One's called Graven, and one's called Ignis from stuff. They're not completely created. I tend to use Latin. I tend to move towards Latin because I love how Latin feels to talk about.
Those are names that have correspondence, though, in historical usage. I mean, so
yeah.
let's. Well, first of all, where are you at? I mean, are you going to collapse or what's going on? Because we can.
Tired. I'm tired. I finished wine and it's 10 o'clock at night, and I have work.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm up at 7.
So we should probably wrap. Yes. Or do you have things that you would like to?
Or mention a couple of awesome people and a couple of companies and stuff. If I can plug some stuff.
Sure.
So working on my calendar this year. My photography is going to be with Dark Slide Photography, which is awesome, and that's with Anders Viking. That was messaging. He's my photographer, and he is fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to working with him on art for the calendar. Again with Berdizo Books are fantastic. It's always charity anthologies. All the money goes to. I think we've mostly worked with autism. Let's have a look where it is. Resources for Autism and Cystic Fibrosis Trust over the last year. So everything goes to that.
Is this Dark Slide Photography here?
This is the photographer I'll be working with this year.
So that's darkslide.photography.co.uk. All right. Yeah. So let's because I'm going to show off everything as you see. It looks amazing. Yeah, it looks really good.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Forward to that for the calendar. I'm not telling you what's going to be in the picture exactly, but almost everybody knows anyway. But
I believe that's our Viking right there.
That is your Viking. That is Anders the Viking. So, but yes. So, looking forward to that. You've got Berdizo Books. You've got Teresa Derwin, who is edited for me, and she's fantastic as well. Trying to think of anybody else. I work with tons of different projects and stuff all the time, but those are the main that are kind of like jumping out at me at the moment, and things I work with and people I work with. I don't think of anybody else I've worked with recently. Oh, I have some gorgeous pictures that I had done with Future Chronicles.
So again, here's our
yeah. It'll load up. Berdizo Books.
And that is facebook.com/Berdizo Books.
Yep.
BURDIZZO.
So I need to link this on there because I've talked about them all evening.
Okay. Yep.
Trying to think what else I have. There's a book on Drabbles that will be out in February, I believe. 100-word Drabbles.
What is that?
100-word stories.
What's Drabbles?
Drabbles is a 100-word story. And this. So if you look up Kevin Kennedy.
Okay.
You should find if you try Drabbles and Kevin Kennedy. Because he's a guy that does anthologies, and his anthologies are amazing. They're really, really good ones. But the Drabbles one isn't out till February, but that is what it looks like. That is the book that will be out in February. And if you look it up on Facebook, there's 100 stories of 100 words.
Wow.
People from ranging from myself to Richard Cheesemar, is it? Who wrote Gwendy's Button Box with Stephen King.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and I think is Lisa Morton in there, who's the chairperson of the Horror Writers Association. Nope, wrong Kevin Kennedy. Don't know who that is.
Don't know who that is. Is it Kevin J. Kennedy?
No, but no. But yeah, he's if you just find him on Facebook, it's pretty easy.
Oh, here we go. This isn't him though. This is Colleen Owen.
No, and that's from 2015.
Yeah. All right. Never mind. So trying really hard.
But yeah. So so that'll be out in February. That's the next book that will be out, and then I've got a poem out with Nowhere Books, and that got announced the other day that I got a poem in there that I'm very excited about. Embers, it's called.
What was the name of it again?
The name of the poem. That I really enjoyed writing that. My housemate Leanna, the other half of the Ghoul Guides, wrote a poem, and I got her in contact with them, and she's been accepted, so she's incredibly excited about her poetry. And,
that's great. That's great.
Yeah. So that is my lineup of stuff that I'm working on. Anything I can talk about, actually.
All right, I'm going to wrap this. No, I'm going to wrap this up by showing off all your spaces on. At least the primary ones that are on the internet. All right.
Yes, sounds good to me.
And let's start here. So yeah, this is one of my conversations, and Pippa Bailey, who is at this point now 3 years a friend, and UK writer, horror writer, reviewer, and one half of the YouTube channel, the Ghoul Guides. This is her website.
Yay!
PippaBailey.co.uk.
Yeah, I need to add more to that.
There's always room to add.
Yeah, I so have to add stuff to the blog and things I haven't added since HorrorCon. There's some really awkward pictures of me at HorrorCon.
Right. She's also on Facebook, Pippa Bailey, and does do a lot of posting there. This is the Ghoul Guides channel on YouTube, so it's the Ghoul Guides. I don't think you guys don't have a channel name. You're kind of like UCGBRFIZHWX.
No. On YouTube we are literally just /Ghoul Guides.
Oh, interesting, because right now I'm showing.
Yeah.
That's
it may be an old link, unless they've changed it as to, you have to have a certain number of views or whatever. It should just come up as just Ghoul Guides on YouTube. You just have to be, yep. There you go. That's us. It should just come up as Ghoul Guides.
Yeah, no, you're getting like a scrambled egg.
Oh.
Yeah, you might want to check it out.
That's different.
Yep.
I will do.
Check that. Facebook for the Ghoul Guides. Now you do have a separate Facebook page on Facebook, but I don't think you really use it, right?
We have one, Fade, which we will be up and running and probably run by Leanna.
I meant there's a
with
Pippa
the new
Bailey.
iPad.
There's a Pippa Bailey.
Pippa Bailey Fiction. That's my I did have an alternate Facebook that was Pippa Bailey Fiction is also mine. That's my author page. Probably haven't used that for a while. It's got my face on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, far too many memes and crap posted everywhere.
Right. Although, look, there's a link to the first,
Yeah, I should it everywhere.
So that's all right. And of course, you can go to Verdizo Books on Amazon, so on, to buy Sparks and a few other books that she's in. And if you want to cut the mustard, just go to the link at the bottom of this YouTube video and go to her her Amazon page, where you'll find all of the books that she's in that are currently available on Amazon. Some are Kindle, I think, and some are strictly paper. Oh no, one is only in paperback. But anyway, because what I would say at the end of this, like I've said in a number of interviews, it's really great to like stuff. Please like everything, but the order of steps are to please buy, like, and review and share. Okay, meaning to share. So like buy, like, and share, because if you don't buy it, all this is for nothing in a way, right? Because we are independent creators and we're trying very hard to ply our wares. So Pippa Bailey, the author, needs you to buy, like, and share. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So thank you so much for coming into my world, into the little tiny box, and talking.
No problem. It's been nice being here and talking about stuff and talking about writing. It's been really good to have like a proper sort of good chunk of talking about stuff. That's the way I do it. I'm the opposite of the standard YouTube in that I believe in doing, if it's a 6-hour interview, good enough. So, hey, and that's my bell. So I'm gonna stop broadcasting. So thank you very much again, Pippa Bailey, for being here on FLAMEAPE Conversations, and thank you, folks, for watching. See ya.
See ya.